doing some things from a class tonight, and I saw that, and I don't know why I didn't think about it last week, but I saw that, and I thought, I need to point that out. So I've done that. Now we are back to 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 13. Remember that I've told you that we're not going to deal with 1st and 2nd Chronicles verse by verse, but wherever something in the account gives us more information, we switch over, and that's what we did. We looked at those two chapters at the end of 1st Chronicles. From now on, we'll be in 2nd Chronicles. All right, 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 13. Now Adonijah, who is Adonijah? Adonijah. I don't know what happened to me. Who is Adonijah? He is one of David's sons. Which one? Yeah, he'd be the fourth one, right? First two are dead. The third one, he's never mentioned after birth, possibly died in childhood or infancy. Adonijah would be next in line in the, what is the word, the primogenitor of that dynasty. He would be the next one up, okay? Who in the world is Haggith? Yep, that's his mother. So just tell your kids and grandkids, don't name your daughters Haggith. That I would hate to be married to Haggith. Maybe it was a beautiful name in those days. Adonijah, the son of Haggith, came to Bathsheba, the mother of Solomon. And she said, "Do you come peacefully?" And he said, "Peacefully." Then he said, "I have something to say to you." And she said, "Speak." So he said, "You know that the kingdom is mine, and that all Israel expected me to be king. However, the kingdom has turned about and become my brother's, for it was his from the Lord. Now I'm making one request of you, do not refuse me." And she said to him, "Speak." And he said, "Please speak to Solomon the king, for he will not refuse you, that he may give me Agishag the Shunammite as a wife." Bathsheba said, "Very well, I will speak to the king for you." Who is Abishag the Shunammite? She was the nurse to David in his old age. Okay? And we're told something very specifically about her in chapter 1. Well, she was pretty. I forgot about that one. Yeah, she was very pretty. David did not sleep with her. Okay? Yeah, he did not know her as a literal language, but that's what we're talking about. Okay? So that's the circumstance. Bathsheba, Maacah, Athaliah, Haggith. What do those four names have in common? They're what? Well, one of them was David's wife. Bathsheba was. Just those four names up the top: Bathsheba, Maacah, Athaliah, Haggith. Only one of them was David's wife. What? Yes, and she's the only one that was David's wife. No. Haggith is not on that list. Oh, she is on the list. Oh, but I have her in parentheses. I'm sorry. I have her in parentheses. I got her in parentheses for a different reason. And I'll explain to you why in a minute. Anybody else want to guess? Bathsheba being married to Solomon, David is not the right answer. Okay? What do those names have in common? Huh? Okay, in that list, Maacah and Athaliah are a long day down the road from David. Just throw David out he ain't got nothing to do with it. Okay. She's a queen. So was Bathsheba. She does. She does. She was bad. These are all queen mothers that we will see in the Bible who have influence on their sons who rule, or in the case of Athaliah, even her son-in-law. Okay, I have Haggith in parentheses because she's never technically a queen mother. But if Adonijah had been made king, she would have been. And I wondered, as you get a little further into this, it never says, but I wondered if his mama might have influenced his thinking a little bit. I don't know. Doesn't say that. But anyway, he says, here's what I want you to do. He says, you know that the kingdom was mine. Was it? How many of you were here last Wednesday? Okay, so you remember last Wednesday we looked at 2 chapters at the end of 1 Chronicles. Was it a surprise moment when David in his old age said, no, I'm putting Solomon on my mule and letting him run around the city, and that was, nobody saw that coming? He was, but I'm talking about the last 2 chapters of 1 Chronicles. Was it a surprise moment? Why not? David brought all of his men in, all the court officials, everybody's there, all of his kids are there, and he puts his son on the throne and everybody sees it. There is no surprise. So when Adonijah now says to Bathsheba, you know that the kingdom was mine, was it? In his mind, was it? It shouldn't have been. He's been told, he witnessed the coronation himself. But you know, some people, we don't know anything about this in this country, but I've heard in some places that people who run for office and lose the election don't quit and deny the election. And, you know, there may be a little bit of some of that going on with Adonijah. He's in a moment of self-denial here because the kingdom was not his. And all Israel expected me to be king. Did they? I don't think so. Now, I guess you could argue if things went to where they're supposed to go, he would be the next king because he's next in line. And so Israel would, you know, they got their little charts out, following the monarchy, and they got it all figured out. But no, there's been no secret about Solomon being the one. How long has David known that his son Solomon would be the king after him? Decades. The prophet came to him and told him that the son that was born to him after the child that he and Bathsheba have dies. David goes back to her. She has another son, and the Lord sent a prophet to say, I love him. They gave him a different name than Solomon, which means loved of God. And the prophet told David that he's going to be the one that will take the throne after David. This should not be top secret stuff. But it seems like people, I don't know, it's a weird generation, I guess. They probably just heard what they wanted to hear and believed what they wanted to believe. We can't identify with that, but try. You know that the kingdom was mine, that all Israel expected me to be king. However, the kingdom has turned about, and become my brothers. Like all of a sudden the tables were turned and nobody saw this coming, and what he's doing is he's building in his mind a legitimate reason to say to Bathsheba, you owe me a favor. Okay? She doesn't, but that's what he's doing. And then he puts this little thing in here at the end, for it was his from the Lord. Are you like me? Do you see a little insincerity in that comment? I think so. I don't think he's happy about this at all. And I think that knowing what the Lord had already said is why he pulls off his stunt with Joab and Abiathar and handpicks the people that will come down and celebrate him, and also handpicks the ones that will not be invited, as we saw that at the end of 1 Kings or chapter 1. So Bathsheba went to King Solomon to speak to him for Adonijah. And the king rose to meet her, bowed down before her, and sat on his throne. And then he set a throne for the king's mother. That's what she has in common with those other three names that were up there. She's a queen mother. And guess what happens with queen mothers? When they talk, their sons listen. Okay? And so Solomon arises, bows down, sits on his throne, has another one set for her, and she gets to sit on his right. That is the favored place. And then she said, I'm making one small request of you. Do not refuse me. And the king said to her, ask my mother, for I will not refuse you. So she said, let Abishag the Shunammite be given to Adonijah, your brother's wife. Now, when he first came to her, Adonijah, and said, go talk to your son for me, what was her first reaction when Adonijah comes to her? Do you come in peace? What was her view of Adonijah before David put Solomon on the mule? Do you remember? And once he's on the throne, Bathsheba said, me and my son will be considered as offenders. And they would have been. If he gets in power, we're dead. So that's the way she sees him. And now he comes to her, so, she says, do you come in peace? That'd be the first question I'd want to ask too if I were her. Okay? So she makes a request to David, let Abishag the Shunammite be given to Adonijah, your brother, as a wife. Harmless, right? Well, Solomon doesn't think so either. Okay, we know because the text has made it very clear to us that she was never David's concubine, although he had concubines. She was never one of his wives, although he had wives. That didn't happen. What do you think would be the perception of the man on the street as far as the relationship is between Abishag and David? So, right answer, wrong question. What do you think the man on the street or the woman on the street, the people in the marketplace, when they're sitting around gossiping, because, it might not be baseball season, when they're sitting around gossiping about what's going to happen next, what do you think they think is the relationship between Abishag and David? Probably thinks she's one of his concubines. That would be the perception. Okay? It's probable that the people didn't see her in any other role. And if the people don't see her in any other role and he gets her, Debbie, then what happens? he has a huge amount of clout, at least in his mind. It's a bid for the throne. And if the people see her as a concubine, then he's just got that much more support. It is just the fact that if you possess the harem of a deceased king, it is the equivalent to making a claim for the throne. Doesn't just happen in ancient Israel. We have records of that same kind of thing happening in the other kingdoms around. That's just the way people operated and thought in those days. And so this is not a little thing that she's asking. And I'm kind of a little bit surprised that she's taken in by this. Because boy, her son's sure not taken in by it. Solomon answered and said to his mother, "Why are you asking Abishag the Shunammite for Adonijah? Ask for him also the kingdom, for he is my older brother, even for him, for Abiathar the priest, and for Joab the son of Zeruiah." Now, back at the end of chapter 1, after Adonijah pulled this stunt and finds that David has made Absalom king, he's terrified. He runs and grabs holds of the horns of the altar, and David, it's reported to Solomon that his brother has done that. And so Solomon says, if he's a worthy man, not one of his hairs will fall to the ground, but if wickedness is found in him, he will die. So King Solomon sent, and they brought him down from the altar, and he came and prostrated himself before King Solomon, and Solomon said to him, "Go to your house." So that was the way things ended before Adonijah pulls his latest stunt and goes to Bathsheba and asks for Abishag for a wife. What he is doing here is absolute wickedness. It says we're not going to have any of that. Solomon said, "Go to your house," which basically says don't mess up. He'll tell somebody else in a few minutes to go to their house. We'll see that. Then King Solomon swore by the Lord, saying, "May God do so to me and more also, if Adonijah has not spoken this word against his own life. Now therefore, as the Lord lives, who has established me and set me on the throne of David my father, and who has made me a house as he promised, surely Adonijah shall be put to death today." So King Solomon sent Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, and he fell upon him so that he died. Benaiah was the captain of the king's guard, and he's about to get a promotion. But Adonijah forfeits his right to live because he did exactly what Solomon warned him not to do, practice wickedness. And this is not just a struggle within a family for power. I know they make a great soap opera out of this if it went to Hollywood. But who is king and why is he king? God made him king. What was that passage we saw at the end of 1 Chronicles? It is the throne of the Lord that was given to Solomon. Solomon gets that. Adonijah doesn't get that. And now it's too late. Okay? There's not going to be another repeat of the house of Saul versus the house of David. King says in a very summary fashion that David ruled 40 years. He actually ruled 40 years and 6 months. 7.5 years in Hebron, while he was only king in Hebron, and Ishbosheth was trying to be the king over Israel. And then 33 years he reigns in Jerusalem. And during that 33 years, there is just constant friction between him and somebody from the house of Saul all the time. Even towards the very end, there's things going on. Well, there's not going to be any more of that. This is going to get, as Barney Fife would say, nipped in the bud right up front. Okay, at this time, Solomon already has a wife. We don't find that here. We find it later on. Her name is Naamah. She is an Ammonitess. And and they already have a 1-year-old son by the name of Rehoboam. Now, to do the math and get that all figured out, you got to run those references down that I have up on the screen. But that's what you're going to find out. At the time that he is made king, that Adonijah pulls his stunt, there is already an heir apparent to Solomon. So what Adonijah is really trying to do here is upset the whole thing, and it's just not going to work. All right, then to Abiathar the priest, the king said, go to Anathoth, to your own field, for 50 points. Who else goes to Anathoth? Who? He was. Who else goes to Anathoth? His name starts with Jeremiah. Does that ring a bell? Jeremiah the prophet will also be from the city of Anathoth, but that won't be for a couple more years. Okay? To Abiathar the priest, the king said, go to Anathoth, to your own field, for you deserve to die, but I will not put you to death at this time, because you carried the ark of the Lord before my father David. Well, when did he do that? He did it 2 different times. Huh? When they brought it into Jerusalem was the first time, and the second time was, you got a haircut, didn't you? I like it. The second time is David is forced to go into exile because of Absalom. As he goes out, Abiathar and Zadok bring out the Ark of the Covenant to go with David. And David said, no, send it back. And you stay back and you be my intelligence network. So it's true, he carried the Ark of the Lord God before my father David, and because you were afflicted in everything with which my father was afflicted. So Solomon dismissed Abiathar from being priest to the Lord. Well, what does it say he was afflicted in everything with which my father was afflicted? What's that all about? Well, but that's... I told you this last week, but it's easy to forget. Remember when Saul got angry and killed all the priests at Nob? Abiathar was the one priest that escaped, and when he escaped, where did he go? To where David was. And then he stayed with David throughout all that time that David is on the run and Saul is trying to kill him. That's what Solomon's talking about when he says, because you were afflicted in everything with which my father was afflicted. You were with my father during all those terrible days, and basically out of respect to that, you ought to die, you deserve to die, you should die, but I'm going to do something else different. I'm going to send you home, and you are now retired, and that is the end of the line of priests that will come from Abiathar, okay? So the office of the high priest from Aaron to the fall of Jerusalem is listed in 1 Chronicles chapter 6, verses 1 through 15. You probably don't need to see that or never really lost any sleep worrying about it, but just so you know, there is a line established from Aaron all the way to Nebuchadnezzar sacking the city of Jerusalem. And then in 1 Chronicles chapter 6, verses 49 through 53, there is a list of priests from Aaron to Ahimaaz, who is the son of Zadok. Doesn't go as far because it didn't go all the way to Nebuchadnezzar. But you got this line of priests here. What is this thing that to fulfill the word of the Lord which he'd spoken concerning the house of Eli in Shiloh? What's that all about? About chapter 2 of 1 Samuel. Eli's old and he's fat and happy. How come he's fat? How come he's fat? He what? He doesn't play tennis? Well, I don't either. He and his sons were getting the best of all the meat that was brought to sacrifice. They were getting more than the priestly share. Okay? And on top of that, his sons were acting on a level of wickedness that just, would make you blush if you were a sailor. And so because of that, God says, the time is coming when the house of Eli is going to be broken. Well, the house of Eli comes all the way down to the present priest by the name of Abiathar. Abiathar now goes into retirement, and that's going to end the line from Eli. There's not going to be another high priest from the descendants of Eli after that. Now, Eli's descendants are still Levites. They are still the sons of Aaron. They still serve as priests. Some of his descendants will be mentioned in the list of the 24 groups of priests that will serve in the temple when it's built. But this is fulfillment of that prophecy that God spoke in the middle of the night to Samuel because of he and his son's wickedness. Okay? Now, verse 28, now the news came to Joab, for Joab had followed Adonijah, although he had not followed Absalom. And Joab fled to the tent of the Lord and took hold of the horns of the altar, because that worked well for the last guy, right? Did it work well for the last guy? It didn't? He fled to the horns of the altar, and it was told King Solomon that Joab had well, it did work for Adonijah the first time. Huh? It did the first time. All right, it was verse 29. It was told to King Solomon that Joab had fled to the tent of the Lord, and behold, he is beside the altar. Then Solomon sent Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, saying, "Go fall upon him." So he was a big fat guy too. Not really. That's just a polite way of saying he killed him. So Benaiah came to the tent of the Lord and said to him, "Thus the king has said, come out." But he said, "No, for I will die here." And Benaiah brought the king word again, saying, "Thus spoke Joab, and thus he answered me." The king said to him, "Do as he has spoken, and fall upon him and bury him, that you may remove from me and from my father's house the blood which Joab shed without cause." What did David tell Solomon about Joab? Don't let his gray hair go down to Sheol. Don't let him die as an old man full of life. Does he tell him when to make his move? He doesn't. He says, "You'll know how." Well, Joab has given his allegiance, boy, my tongue's tied tonight, has given his allegiance to Adonijah. That is an act of rebellion against the king. It's an act of treason. It's an act that carries the death penalty all to itself. That's why he goes and grabs the horns of the altar, hoping that he'll get mercy. And Solomon's not going to give him any mercy. But why does Solomon say he's going to be executed? For the blood of Amasa and the blood of Absalom, the innocent blood that he the blood of war at a time of peace, and all those things that David had said to him. So Solomon is demonstrating a level of maturity and wisdom even before he asks for wisdom. Okay? The Lord will return his blood on his own head, because he fell upon two men more righteous and better than he. and killed them with the sword while my father David did not know it. Abner the son of Ner, commander of the army of Israel, and Amasa the son of Jether, commander of the army of Judah. So shall their blood return on the head of Joab and on the head of his descendants forever. But to David and his descendants and his house and his throne, may there be peace from the Lord forever. Then Benaiah the son of Jehoiada went up and fell upon him and put him to death. And he was buried at his own house in the wilderness. The king appointed Benaiah the son of Jehoiada over the army in Joab's place. And the king appointed Zadok the priest in place of Abiathar. All right? And so with that, the kingdom is established militarily. It is established, say it again, religiously. Everything that God has said is to happen is happened, and so that's kind of the end of it. Well, not quite. Now the king sent and called for Shimei and said to him, build for yourself a house in Jerusalem and live there, and do not go out from there to any place. Okay? Same thing he said to Abiathar. For on the day you go out and cross over the brook Kidron, you will know for certain that you shall surely die. Your blood shall be on your own head. Shimei then said to the king, the word is good, as my lord the king has said, so your servant will do. So Shimei lived in Jerusalem many days. Remember that Jerusalem is in two sections. There's the upper section. That's where the temple is going to be. That's where the palace is going to be. That's where the Jebusites had their stronghold. The lower section had many times in Israel's history been in control of Israel, but then the Jebusites would beat them back and the Jebusites would take control of it. Who was the one that finally defeated the Jebusites and got the high ground in Jerusalem? Starts with a David. Does that help? David was the one that did that. All right. The brook Kidron is the city limits, you might say, of the lower part of Jerusalem. Okay? So if he gets that far and crosses that brook, then your blood's going to be on your own head. And it says that he did what the king told him to do for many days. But it came about at the end of 3 years that two of the servants of Shimei ran away to Achish, son of Maacah, king of Gath. That's a different Maacah from the one that I had up on the screen, mostly because he's a guy and the other one was a girl. They told Shimei, saying, behold, your servants are in Gath. Then Shimei arose and saddled his donkey and went to Gath to Achish to look for servants. Shimei went and brought his servants from Gath, and it was told Solomon that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath and had returned. So the king sent and called for Shimei and said to him, did I not make you swear by the Lord and solemnly warn you, saying, you will know for certain that on the day you depart and go anywhere you shall surely die? And you said to me, the word which I have heard is good. Why then have you not kept the oath of the Lord and the command which I laid on you? The king also said to Shimei, you know all the evil which you acknowledge in your heart, which you did to my father David. Therefore the Lord shall return your evil on your own head. But King Solomon shall be blessed. The throne of David shall be established before the Lord forever. So the king commanded Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, and he went out and fell upon him so that he died. Now, thus the kingdom was established in the hands of Solomon. And that takes us to a whole new section in the account of 1 Kings. So in chapter 3, we'll start this way and then we'll switch over to Chronicles. Chapter 3, verses 1 and 2, we have the account of Solomon's reign beginning with a marriage. Verse 3 through 5, Solomon goes to Gibeon. The Lord appears to him there with an offer. Verses 6 through 9, the Lord said, ask what you want. Well, Solomon made his ask. Verses 10 through 14, God's grace is given. There is also, along with that, a conditional promise that is separate from I'll give you wisdom. Okay, it's not tied to that, it's different. Verse 15, there is the offering that Solomon gives to the Lord. Verses 16 through 28, we're going to see the discerning wisdom of Solomon on display. What is, in your mind, the crown proof of Solomon's wisdom? If you had to say that the test right now was write down on a piece of paper one thing Solomon did that proves to you he had great wisdom, what would you put on that piece of paper? His decision about the babies. Yeah, that's chapter 3. We just won't get it tonight. Then Solomon formed a marriage alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and took Pharaoh's daughter and brought her to the city of David until he had finished building his own house and the house of the Lord and the wall around Jerusalem. That's a little confusing. First of all, we're not told why he made this alliance, but it says that's why he marries her. What would you think would be a reason for him making this alliance with Pharaoh? What? For warfare? Have Egypt support for warfare? Yeah, that would be one. Anybody else? A resource? Yep. It gives him another access to land, trade by land coming up the Nile. There's a lot of riches, gold coming up from the Nile. And he gets another seaport. Now, he's already got some, but he gets a wide open seaport. The Philistines and the Cherethites and the Phoenicians still control most of the coastal plains on the west side. And so this really gives him some tremendous access for commerce. But it also gives him an ally should there be somebody that wants to make a military move on Solomon. Solomon is not going to have to fight the battles that his father David had to fight, but we will see language, particularly over in 2 Chronicles, that will talk about Solomon capturing cities or people. So there were military operations, but he was not a man of war, and there were no major wars going on. But it's going to be him that captures these places. The other thing about Solomon, not only is he the wise man, but he is the guy who establishes in its totality all the borders that God had said he would give to Israel back in the days of Moses. Solomon's going to be the guy that they get to put the atlas out, the map that shows it just like God laid it out. Solomon controls all that. We don't know who this Pharaoh is, and I'm saying we because I sure don't. But there were a number of different dynasties in Egypt, and it's thought that this guy was the last Pharaoh of the 21st dynasty. He reigns for 35 years, and his reign would be simultaneous with Solomon's reign. Solomon reigns how long? 40 years, okay? The next Pharaoh after him will start a new dynasty. And when you have a new dynasty, it's never a smooth transition. This group got beaten out by that group, a lot of blood and war. The new guy is going to be a guy by the name of Shishak. And he's going to march on Jerusalem, I think in the 11th year or the 7th year of Rehoboam's reign. And he's going to take a lot of plunder. So whatever alliance Solomon had with the Pharaoh whose daughter he married, that goodwill ended when Solomon dies, okay? The wording might indicate that the wedding doesn't take place right away, but I have a hard time thinking that it didn't take place for 20 years. I mean, who wants to be a fiancé and engaged for 20 years? But it does tell us in the account over in Chronicles one reason why there is a delay. Chapter 8, verse 11, then Solomon brought Pharaoh's daughter up from the city of David to the house which he had built for her, for he said, my wife shall not dwell in the house of David, king of Israel, because the places are holy where the ark of the Lord has entered. I think that's a very telling statement about Solomon's understanding of holiness. He has married a foreign woman. She's not under the covenant, at least not when he enters into this alliance with Pharaoh. And he is not going to profane where the Ark of the Covenant has been by having her there. So he's got a lot of respect and love for God early in his reign. Was taking an Egyptian wife a violation of the law? One yes, and everybody else is just chewing gum. You'd say yes, two yes. That's three. Foster, I saw you nod your head. I'm going to count that. The rest of you thinking there's a trap? How many of you think there's a trap? Good. Because there is. No. Taking an Egyptian wife was not a violation of the law. In fact, marrying foreigners were actually permitted under the law. Deuteronomy 21, beginning in verse 10. The implied expectation, however, is that when you take that woman, or I guess a woman could take a husband, when you take that marriage partner, she becomes a proselyte of the Jewish faith. She puts away her idols. Okay? There was some very strong language about who you can't marry. Do you remember who it was? Anybody in the seven kingdoms of the Canaanites. They're the ones that you were not allowed to intermarry your sons with their daughters, your daughters with their sons. It says it twice, and it says specifically because God does not want idolatry to come into the nation. I forget which one of those. If it's I think it's in Deuteronomy a little further down. No, it's in Deuteronomy 21. The warning is that if you get involved with the idolatry of the foreigners, it'll be like stings in your eyes. I forget the other word that basically means they'll drag you down, and God will end up by saying, what I'm going to do to them, I will do to you. If you marry these foreign wives and you go after their gods and go into idolatry, I dispossess them, I'm going to dispossess you if you do that. Did they do that? And did he dispossess them? Absolutely. All right. The people were still sacrificing. I don't want to get here. Let's quit a minute early. Because the high places needs to be a discussion. Any question about what we've talked about so far? All right. Let's have a prayer. Father, as we close out our assembly this evening, we're so thankful that you have blessed us today. We're thankful, Father, for the things that you have revealed to us about your nature, about your power in the passages that we've been looking at. Father, I ask that you give me and everyone in this room a love for your word, to see this not as a history, but as a revealing of who you are and how you expect your people to respond. We ask, Father, as we leave this place, that you would bless us, bless all those that we have been asked to pray for, and give the doctors that care for them the wisdom and knowledge that they need. And we ask that you would watch over us as we go home and give us a good night's rest. In Christ's name, amen.